purpose of Freethought Forum is to be vigilant to the encroachment of religion into government and to educate the general public as to what a freethinker is.
My thoughts give me power.
No scholar can map them.
No hunter can trap them. No person can deny. Die Gedanken sind frei. No person can deny. Die Gedanken sind frei.
Hello, my name is Hugh Henry, and this is Freethought Forum. And we're doing our book report, as we always do with these series. And with me, I have Mary Lou Thompson, who's an atheist activist, and I have Jim Barrot, who is a skeptic. And they have brought some books to talk about that you may like to read. Mary Lou, would you like to start us off, please?
Oh, sure I would. The book that I brought this time is called Mother Nature, A History of Mothers, Infants, and Natural Selection by Sarah Blathy Hardy. I guess you say it Hardy, it's spelled H-R-D-Y. And it is quite interesting. I enjoyed it quite a bit because there is a lot of instinct in this thing and, of course, conditioning. And evolving mothers had to decide sometimes between saving themselves or their baby. And usually they would sacrifice the baby because, you know, they could go on and create more babies. And so it was a decision between quantity and quality, whether they wanted a whole lot of babies that might die or raise one or two. And infanticide was a quite common birth control method, and not just in primitive times, but of course, you call it in Greece and Rome, and of course in the Oriental countries. And one method of birth control, though, was to nurse the child for a long period of time, sometimes up to 4 years. And when a kid gets that old, it's pretty hard to wean them. And like I say, infanticide saved resources for earlier children or enabled the mother to survive and produce more children. If she abandoned the baby in the first 72 hours, she was okay, because real bonding doesn't occur until, you know, you've been with them at least that time. Wet nurses were used in the 18th century, and of course in other times. A wet nurse who lived in the home to nurse the baby was much more expensive and was usually reserved for the male heir. Little baby girls were sent out to the wet nurse's home because they really weren't that important. But I guess in those times in the 18th century, they frowned on your killing your kids right away. The mother instinct is the old nurture-nature theory, part genetic and part environment. Because, of course, there are quite a few mothers who are not really crazy about their babies. They will kill them, you know, or abandon them like they do. Now, allo mothers were also important. Of course, this is seen among chimpanzees. Either an older sibling or a sister of the mother, something like that, will take care of the baby when the mother's out foraging. And this is, of course, in humans, you have cousins and older siblings that take care of the baby. And, of course, once nursing begins, the mother is endocrinologically, centrally and neurologically transformed to bond with the baby and serve its needs. And even if she had determined she was not going to keep this child, after she starts nursing it, it's going to make it very difficult to give up the child. And we've, of course, have been evolutionarily programmed to respond positively to large heads and large eyes and small noses and mouths and ears. You just can't help it. Boys aren't so much this way, but little girls, I mean, with a new baby, I mean, they want to hold it. I mean, it's an instinctual thing. My little grandson, he's 5, he has a new baby sister. He's crazy about her. He wants to kiss her and hold her. So it's taken, you know, evolution a long time to do it, but we're trapped in this thing, you know. If you have a baby, you want to take care of it. And that's why the human race continues on. The book, again, is Mother Nature by Sarah Blathy Hardy.
Thank you. I know in the case of the Romans, the child was brought before the head of the family, the paterfamilias, and if he took it and named it, then it was a person, it was a human being. And if he simply handed it back, it was a thing.
Yeah.
And it could be left in the trash, it could be left out on a mountainside,
Wow.
it could be sacrificed to the gods on an altar.
Yeah, tell that to the fetus savers.
Yeah, well, it's moved back and forth over time. What have you got, Jim?
Well, I have a book that I thought was very interesting, and it's called Deceptions and Myths of the Bible by Lloyd M. Graham. And he starts off here saying, is the Holy Bible holy? Is it the Word of God, and can it be disproved? There is nothing holy about the Bible, nor is it the Word of God. It was written by God-inspired saints, and it was not written by God-inspired saints, but by power-seeking priests, who but priests considered sin the paramount issue. Who but priests wrote volumes of religious rites and rituals? No one, but for these priestly scribes, sin and ritual were imperatives. Their purpose was to found on them an awe-inspiring religion. By this intellectual tyranny, they sought to gain control, and they achieved it. By 400 BC, they were masters of ancient Israel. For so great a project, they needed a theme, a framework, and this they found in the creation lure of more knowledgeable races. This they commandeered and perverted, the natural to the supernatural, the truth to err. The Bible is, we assert, but priest perverted cosmology. And another place in here he talks about laws. It says, we have been taught to believe in the laws of God and the laws of nature, when actually there are no such thing save those man makes. There are only things and their modes of action. But what determines modes of action? The nature of things. And the nature of things is the sum of their qualities or characteristics. An atom unites with another atom, but it isn't a law that makes it unite. It is because of its energy content. Because of this, it acts expressly itself, and thus so that as in a world, a universe, we have many things. We have a vast interplay of self-expression. These interacting one with another give rise to relationships. Among things constant, these expressions and relationships are also constant, and man, perceiving this constancy, puts it into words and calls it law. Thus man is the lawmaker, not God. God makes things, and laws are but man's perception of these functions.
And what is the name of the book and the author again, please?
Deceptions and Myths of the Bible. It was by Lloyd M. Graham.
Thank you. This is a book that I wanted to review on here for a very long time. I would have liked to have had a speaker on this, but we couldn't get one since we're coming up on the anniversary of the Scopes trial. This book received a Pulitzer Prize when it was written. It's called Summer of the God, The Scopes Trial and America's Continuing Debate Over Science and Religion by E.J. Larson. It was written in 1997. This detailed and engrossing story of the monkey top trial received a Pulitzer Prize in history. No wonder. It's a vivid account of the 1923 confrontation between science and religion as personified by Darrow and Bryan. Larson describes the forces of the day that were pulling America in different direction. It was, of course, more complicated than the science and reason versus Christian fundamentalism, and still is. The popular view is that the Scopes, a teacher of evolution, came out on top thanks to Darrow's brilliance. But consider that in the year 2000, the teaching of evolution is still restricted. So who won? Larson's final paragraph recognizes that it ain't over yet, and that Scopes' trial is really symbolic of a deeper chasm. Indeed, the issues raised by the Scopes trial and legend endure precisely because they embody the characteristic American struggle between individual liberty and majoritarian democracy, and cast it in a timeless debate over science and religion. Now, What you're mostly familiar with is Inherit the Wind, the movie, which is an awful lot of fiction and an awful lot of misstatement of fact. For example, at the time this was written, there was a program on NPR where they interviewed the author. And what he said was that Brian agreed that Darwin was probably right. But what his opposition was based on this, that for instance, in 1900, not many kids went to high school. They got out before that. But by the 1920s, they were all going to high school, and they were getting this little dose of biology, this little bit of evolution. And it was a seed that was being used by others for the worst possible purposes. It was being used for racism. It was being used for eugenics. It was being used for social Darwinism. In fact, Brian said that Darwin's theory was the cause of all the social ills of our age, and he was right. It was the misstatement and misuse of Darwin's theory by people who knew just enough of it to get confused. Brian's idea was, look, don't teach it to them in high school. Let them pick it up in college, but don't teach it to them here. You're only making them right for somebody else to haul them off in a completely false direction. This never came out in the Inherit the Wind. So I highly recommend this book, Summer for the Gods, by E.J. Larson.
I was going to comment that there were two books that I did read that gave the true version like that. One was The Life of Clarence Darrow, and the other one was called Seven Trials. It started with 7 trials in history, starting with the trial of Socrates, and it included the Dayton trial. But what has happened and what should be followed up is that even today in Dayton, Tennessee, they're still fighting the fact that they're teaching creationism, and it's from a religious standpoint and for religious reasons that they teach creationism today.
So what have you got now?
Okie dokie. I want to show you as I get out my book. Let's see, here it is. This book bag that has a drawing by my 7-year-old grandson that was printed on it.
Wow.
This is a replacement for the one the thieves stole out of my house. They didn't want the bag, they just needed to carry the loot.
Oh, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah. Anyway, that's better than a lot of modern paintings I've seen, but I could be prejudiced.
I would.
Anyway, this book is called Seabiscuit, 3 Men and a Racehorse. And it's a darn good book. It reads like fiction because it's so interesting. All the things that happened, like the horse being injured, the jockey being injured twice, his right leg was broken. Once they told him he would never walk again. And the 3 men are Charles Howard was the owner of the horse, Red Pollard was the jockey, and Tom Smith was the trainer. Tom Smith saw this horse at an auction. His name is Seabiscuit. Seabiscuit was not a really pretty horse. He was kind of ugly. He was kind of short and stocky. His knees were, he was over at the knees, as they call it, and when he ran, he flung his front legs out to the side. But Tom Smith, he looked at this horse and he had a rapport. He knew this horse would be a good horse. And the adventures of the races, and how at one time there was a special race scheduled. Well, this horse was not a mudder. He did not run well in mud, in a wet track. And they had this race, and he scratched him 3 times because the ground was muddy. And this happened with other races, and he lost his credibility. But finally, they did get a match race up between him and War Admiral, who was a son of Man of War. Actually, Seabiscuit also had Man of War's genes in him. And the adventures, the descriptions of these people's personality, and the rivalry between Red Pollard and his fellow jockey Wolf, who was called the Iceman because he was so cool on a horse. Pollard was called the Cougar because he was so, eager and not vicious, but intent on getting what he wanted. And there was an interview. I can't make the quote because it has a swear word in it, and it wasn't supposed to be in there. They had these scripts they were supposed to read between Wolf and Pollard, and Red's script fell on the floor, whether on purpose or not, and he said, to Wolfe, you know, they had asked, Wolfe asked him how he should ride the race. And Pollard said, well, you know, get somebody to get you on the horse, face the front, you know, and go to the gate. And then he says the phrase that he can't repeat on family television. But it's just such a wonderfully adventurous book. And actually, if you do read the book, you ought to read into the acknowledgments, because she gives some account of how she found out these things, tracing down people who were witnesses to the thing, or who knew the people, or were descendants of the people. And one old man, he was an octogenarian, and she asked him about if he knew so-and-so at that time. He says, how old do you think I am? You know, and, you know, he died a few weeks later, you know, but, you know, so all of the acknowledgments aren't going in, but the first part is very good. The author, I forgot to tell you, is Laura Hillenbrand. Just, even if you don't like horse racing, of course, if you hate horses and horse racing, you're not going to like it, but I don't like horse racing because I like horses because I like to look at them. They're beautiful. You don't see much of the horse when he's shooting around a track.
No.
But it's just so adventurous and suspenseful. Just a wonderful book to read.
And the name of the book again?
Seabiscuit, 3 Men and a Racehorse.
Thank you. Jim, what you got?
Well, I have a book that is about, it's not by, but it's about a man who was from England, and he was a mathematician and philosopher and humanist and activist.
And
the name of the book is Appointment Denied.
And the author?
And Thom, not Tom, but Thom, Thom, Wiedlich is the author. And of course, it's about Bertrand Russell. And Bertrand Russell was denied an appointment. What it says here, in 1940, New York City Board of Higher Education appointed noted British scholar Bertrand Russell, one of the greatest living philosophers of the day, to the faculty of the publicly funded City College. The board's intent of appointment such a celebrated writer and lecturer was to boost the school's image. Instead, it found itself in the midst of a firestorm when controversive and religious leaders throughout the city, and indeed the country, aghast at Russell's unapologetic atheism and his popular writings on free love, unleashed a protest over the appointment that raged in the headlines for months. And this is one of the things that I have noticed, is that many ministers and supposed religious people deny people the right to think, the right to honestly come to a conclusion that disagrees with their religious philosophy. And many times they'll resort, if nothing else will work, to outright deception or lies. And here they denied a man who was a scholar and a scientist. He's written books on Albert Einstein, and was a very brilliant person, and they denied him the right to teach because he didn't agree with their particular philosophy.
Yeah, I remember in California there was a terrible row over the appointment of Dr. Aptheker to the political science department of University of California at Berkeley. Dr. Aptheker was the chief theoretician for the American Communist Party, and he was supposed to teach communism. And people felt this was a terrible idea. Well, what are they going to get, a French teacher? You know? This is the best guy they could have gotten. No, we don't want no commies in our school. This is one I got to get around to someday. It's called The Experts Speak, the definitive compendium of authoritative misinformation. This is where I get some of the quotes I've used. I could more easily believe 2 Yankee professors would lie than stones would fall from the sky. Thomas Jefferson, 1807. Sure, this is a fun book. Sections on biology, weather, technology are hilarious, but so are those on politics, economics. It's pretty apparent from the book that authorities are often wrong. That's why we list it here. X-rays are a hoax. Lord Kelvin, 1890. I think there is a world market for about 5 computers. Thomas Watson, IBM chairman, 1943. This apparently was updated and expanded in 1984, and there may be an even later edition. It's called The Experts Speak, Definitive Compendium of Authoritative Misinformation, and it's by C. Cerf and V. Navasky. What have you got for us?
Okie dokie, let me see. We have here The Faith Healers by James Randi.
Randy.
Oh,
Randy
here's-
the Magnificent.
This is going to be a gunning down.
If you had anything against faith healers before, you're going to be definitely confirmed in your opposition to them. He lists a whole, goes through a whole bunch of different faith healers and what they did and how they did it. Several of the chapters are devoted to one particular faith healer. I think it was Grant, that he had a little microphone in his ear, and his wife was in a trailer there, reading to him when he would interview these people in the audience what they had written on the cards they handed in, and it would look like he just knew it, how did he know I've got diabetes or something like that? And I can't remember which one it was, but he described one where this woman had tuberculosis of the spine and was wearing a brace. And the faith healer told her, "You're cured, Jesus has cured you, take off your brace and run across the stage." And she did. And her spine collapsed the next day, and 2 days later she was dead. Now, effectively, this guy killed her. He certainly didn't heal her. The gullibility of the people is just miraculous. I mean, if you want a real miracle, that's it.
Let me explain something here. I believe in tuberculosis of the spine, it's actually destroying the spine.
Right.
So if you take and put pressure and tension on that thing, the spine snaps.
Right.
Snap your spine, you're dead.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, James Randi is very good. Here's his picture. I don't know if you can see it in there, but he and colleagues, would disguise themselves as best they could. And one of them, would go up, this faith healer, one of them who, the people that, what is it, they collapse in the spirit or something like that, faint in the spirits, and the guy would say, "You're healed," and hit him in the forehead, and they'd fall back into the arms of assistance. So one of Randy's cohorts went up there, and they whacked him in the forehead. He just stood there, So he whacked him again. So some pretty funny things in this book. I really enjoyed it. And I'll say again, it's The Faith Healers by James Randi.
Thank you.
He wrote a good book also called The Mask of Nostradamus, which was very interesting in telling how Nostradamus supposedly made his predictions.
Yeah, right. Well, the theory is predict often. Predict often, and one of these times you're going to hit. I saved some predictions from the psyche. Some psyche sent me, and none of them came true in that year.
Yeah, my favorite is the amazing Crichton, who used to put out the most incredible stuff, and he was just good. He was a great performer. All right, Jim, what you got?
Okay, I have a book which is on one of my favorite subjects, and that is thinking. It's called Clear Thinking, A Practical Introduction, and it's by Hy, that's H-Y, Ruthless. And it also has a foreword by Isaac Asimov, who's very well known in the science world and also in
the atheist world, too.
Yeah. And it says, "This is the informative age, complete with networking, computers, global communications, and cleverly packaged ideas. Our heads spin dizzily as claims, counterclaims, hype, and hoopla attempt to change opinions, reinforce beliefs, or convert the skeptic. This flood of information so overwhelms some that they can no longer make sense of it. Content to muddle through, they rely on beliefs, opinions, and vague impressions acquired from family, friends, social or religious groups, and media. Clear thinking is a lively introduction to the basic principles of critical analysis, illustrating how to evaluate evidence, isolate facts, and employ logical reasoning skills in everyday situations. Using examples from real life, author Ruthless shows how to cut through the dense underbrush of arguments, opinions, clever diversions, and contradictions, truths and falsehoods found daily in the media and in conversation. Enhanced by illustrations, vivid examples, the questions you consider, clear thinking emphasizes the importance of careful reasoning and avoiding common errors that cloud judgment.
And again, the author, please?
The author is Ruthless.
Okay. Thank you very much. Dig over here to get the one I want. Of course, earlier today I did something on time. Probably the best of these books, since we're getting towards the end, is this one, Of Time, Passion, and Knowledge by J.T. Fraser. As I've said on my other speech, when St. Augustine said, when nobody asks me, I know what time is. When somebody asks me, I don't know what it is. Only a wayfarer born under unruly stars would attempt to put into practice our epic of proliferating knowledge of the Heraclitean dictum that men who love wisdom must be inquirers into the very many things indeed. Thus begins this remarkable interdisciplinary study of time by a master of the subject. While developing a theory of time as conflict, Fraser offers some many things indeed, an enormous range of ideas about matter, life, death, evolution, and value. This is an extremely valuable and unusual book, original and witty, aware of immense changes of contemporary thought. Though its subject is temporality, at every level of organization, its focus is man, the power and fragility that reside in his stupendous structure of nerve connections, of imagination, of knowledge, and of the specialness of being a human being. That's a review by the Washington Post Book World. This is an important book about an important subject, the nature of time. Fraser brings years of intensive study and reflection on it. This guy is founder of the International Society for the Study of Time. I bet you didn't even know that existed. And is the author of The Genesis and Evolution of Time, Time is Conflict, Time the Familiar Stranger, editor of Voices of Time, and a 6 volumes Study of Time series. This guy is serious when he talks about time.
When you say I didn't know it, I bet you didn't know it existed. Are you talking about time or the organization?
The organization, that seems quite incredible. There's a whole organization of people, and there would be 6 volumes of stuff. Well, this isn't 6 volumes. It's not that thick.
I want to get in this little story about prediction.
You're not going to be able to, I'm afraid.
Well, damn it, I'll do it next time.
All right.
You're always cutting me off, aren't you?
No, I'm cutting me off because we're coming to the end. The book is Of Time, Passion, and Knowledge by J.T. Fraser. Thank you very much. This has been Freethought Forum. I'm Hugh Henry. Tune again for our next book report when she'll be back.
I think as I please, and this gives me pleasure.
My conscience decrees, this right I must treasure.
My thoughts will not cater
To duke or dictator, no person can